Hello. Hello, all. We're back. It's me, Genevieve Brown, here with Dr. Randy Berlin. Hi, Randy.
Hello there. Hey, good to see you again.
We are here for Module 2. Welcome back. This is Module 2 of the Get Unstuck program. Before we dive into today's topics, let's recap everything we went over last week. So last week we discussed setting intentions and we thought about what goals we want to set for the program. We learned about denial and we considered whether we're being honest with ourselves. And we talked about being willing and able to do the work, or at the very least, we want to be willing to do the work. We also talked about the importance of acceptance and taking ownership. And we learned that it is absolutely necessary to accept in order to create change and move forward in life. Super important. We also learned that we need to accept and take ownership even when things aren't our faults. I was innocent, but I'm responsible, right? So in today's class, Module 2, we will discuss 3 topics. We have cross addiction and switching. We have cleaning up the past, and we have willingness to do the work and make amends. So let's dive into this first topic here. Last week, we set intentions and created lists of bad habits we want to work on. This week, let's start off on the topic of cross addiction and switching, so we can review our lists and consider whether any of our existing habits are cross addictions. Randy, can you tell us what is cross addiction and what is switching?
The idea of cross addiction came about when we were looking at what habits you were using to numb out or check out, and whether it was alcohol, drugs, whatever it might be. And it was serving a function. So you have to kind of look at whatever habit you have, it has a function. And we're going to understand through this process that most the functions that we're looking at when we're cross addicted or whether we're doing our primary addiction is we want to numb, anesthetize, run, or avoid from uncomfortable feelings. Bottom line, that's it. And so it doesn't really matter if I'm drinking or drugging to numb out. It doesn't matter if I'm working like a maniac until I'm numbed out. It's culturally more acceptable in one area or another. But the bottom line is what's driving all of this is uh, guilt, shame, past traumas, false impressions, and that they're uncomfortable feelings and interpretations that we don't want to feel. Or they were so intense that we couldn't deal with them at the time, and consequently, we repressed them or suppressed them, depending if it's conscious or unconscious. So the deal is when I start to change a habit now, I look at that and I go, oh, I'm going to change this habit. I'm not going to drink anymore. Then I start eating an excessive amount of food, or I start eating a lot of sugar, or I find myself spending inordinate amounts of time watching social media, or shopping until I drop online. So it doesn't really matter which one of them it is. You're going to find that many of these habits that you may pick up that replace the time you might have spent doing something else, one of your primary addictions, then you go, how did I get over here? I started out giving up this problem. Next thing I know, I'm spending all these hours avoiding my life and doing something that I didn't used to do that much of, but now I'm doing a lot of it. So what you start to recognize, I've switched addictions, switch addictive processes, because there was a bottom line function that initially my addiction was serving, which was this numbing, avoiding, um, blocking. And I didn't realize because I made my decisions or I didn't have a conscious decision of what habit I was going to replace to serve the same function. So if my function is to avoid experiencing life, then all of these things work. If my purpose is now because I want to get unstuck, if you're just doing your old repeated patterns, whether it's a new one, like a whack-a-mole, you knock out the alcohol, but then you pop over here and you're compulsively eating, or you whack this one out, and now I'm compulsively getting involved with fantasy relationships or sex, or that I start to recognize that we need to be aware because we want to get to these uncomfortable feelings. We want them to come to the surface because it's not like they're not there. It's just that we're doing a lot of energy to avoid. I can remember the idea of drinking. Somebody said they didn't drink anymore. And I looked at him and he said, well, what I meant was that I don't pass out every night. And I go, oh. So it was a way of describing his old habit in a way that put him in a form of denial that he still had a problem and or she had a problem. In this case, it was a he that was still getting in the way of them being able to experience their life. So we're here to help you, and cross addiction is one of the ways we have to become a conscious of. You don't have to confront every single one of these. You just need to be aware of, oops, there I am avoiding these feelings that I don't want to have. But my purpose is to start to let myself have these feelings so I can clean up the house. I can get rid of the past so that I'm not spending so much time and energy on trying to avoid something that's already happened or experiencing something that's already happened or processing something so I can put it in perspective. And so these cross addictions are really slippery, and some of them are more culturally accepted than others. But nonetheless, all of these, and we're going to have you make a list of the things you're spending your time on, and whichever of these could be another one of the addictive processes that you're doing compulsively, just to avoid, not to enjoy, just to avoid. So, and I was thinking about how much energy with the drinking. I was thinking about uh, there was this awareness that when I stopped drinking, all of a sudden I wasn't thinking about where you could drink and where you couldn't drink, whose party was I going to, whether they drank or didn't drink, how much am I going to drive, or I need to get a car, or do I need to get a cab, and if I had two, is that going to be enough? If I wait 3 hours, what about if I eat a big meal? And the point was is that there was an endless amount of mental activity that went on around this particular habit that wasn't even necessarily about the actual experience and numbing effect. It was all of the things that are associated with it. When people are having affairs, they tell me that the main thing that they like is all the planning and all the anticipation and all the activities that go around that. All this mental energy is primarily spent on all of the lies and deceptions and activities that have to go on so that you can actually have this conclusion that you want. And you realize that the actual act of being sexual with somebody or getting together with somebody was a small piece of all of the energy that got spent on all the preparation. Same thing as through as around with the alcohol. So just know that we're spending this time, we're doing these things just to avoid not being these, letting these uncomfortable feelings come to the surface, which is mandatory. It's going to be difficult at times. Just know that you're not experiencing anything that you're not already carrying with you. You're just spending energy avoiding having that experience and dealing with it. So it's kind of like if you don't see that you have a mess in the middle of the floor, you're never going to clean it. You just walk around it because you play like it's not there. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, I'd like to have a clean room. Oh, what do I have to do? Oh, I got a bunch of things laying around on the floor. Well, I just been walking around playing like it doesn't matter, but it did because there was energy was being spent that was unnecessary. We're talking about being able to have energy for our lives today, as much and as rich as possible, so that I experience my life as rich and full. Not something I get from the outside, but something that I have inside of me already.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing those examples. I think that's really helpful. What we're doing here is we're often just dwelling on pain from the past. It's stuff that exists from before, and we just keep dipping back into it. And what we need to do is create this awareness so that we can see ourselves doing this. We can catch ourselves and we can learn what these functions are. And so once we become aware, then we can allow ourselves to feel. And that's where the discomfort comes in. And that's the really hard part, is when stuff starts to come up, then you have to feel it and you have to work through it. but we can do this. That's why we're here, and we're going to do this together. We're going to figure out what's driving these habits. So we're now on to the second topic here, which is cleaning up the past. So how do we do this, Randy? How can we clean up the past?
It's like if we have a house we're moving into and it's already full of so much stuff, we can't hardly bring anything new in, then there's no space for new life, new patterns and new ways of being. So one of the things that's important to do is to be able to clean out everything that's not helpful, all the things that are harmful, all the things that might get in the way of being able to enjoy my house today. I want to clean it out and get it. So I really decide, what do I want to have in my house today? What is it I want to have around me so that I'm creating the best environment for me that reflects my inside so that I can have a comfortable experience inside, outside and inside. So there were these things are somewhat coherent and are together. So anyway, I realized that if I do not change these habits and patterns of avoiding these old traumas, they will sneak out and want to get into my life today in ways that I say, well, why am I keep doing the same thing? Why am I still stuck doing the same thing? And every time I feel bad about it because I'm doing something that's outside my own value system. And I'm doing it because the body wants to be relieved of this distress and these traumas from the past. And if I don't address them, then they will keep showing up in the experiences in life over and over and over again, so that you continually have this life that's stuck in trauma and distress and wondering, why would I keep going back to the same relationship? Why would I keep going back to the same situation? You think, well, the trauma wants to be released. If you're not letting yourself feel it, then and acknowledge for what actually happened to you early on, then you're destined to keep it up. It's not an option. You will keep repeating. And when you say, why do people do the same things over and over, even though they know it's going to be awful? Because they're trying to relieve some trauma. And that's a big deal. And so let's looking at some of the things that we feel the shame about, and we feel these carried feelings of shame and guilt, and as I mentioned earlier, trauma as well as misperceptions or false perceptions of self. And and they usually come by many of the activities that we've done in our life that we look back on and we say, I don't feel good about what I did when I was 12 years old and I stole somebody's money. And do I think it's a big deal now? No, but is it one of maybe hundreds or thousands of things that I did kind of come together and end up creating a sense of that there's something bad about me, or that I'm not a good person, or I don't deserve to feel good. I don't deserve to have a good life. Matter of fact, if I let myself just keep these accumulation of things that I've experienced and that I've created, I'm going to stay with an attitude that even though I have an opportunity to feel better about myself, I'm not going to let myself. Because somewhere inside of me at an unconscious level it says, wait a minute, you did all these things, you deserve to be punished. And instead of being punished, what we're going to do in our program is to find ways to make amends for these things, to find ways to go back. And if I stole money from so and so, that it doesn't mean I'll go back and necessarily give them money. But if I found them and saw them and I stole this, fair amount of money, I might say, okay, I'm going to write you a letter. Or maybe if I run into you, I might say, hey, I owe you some money. I need to deal with that now. And it's this attitude that starts to happen, that you look for chances to maybe run into people or have situations or find situations that actually create the opportunity, rather than seeing somebody walk down the street and say, oh my God, I don't want to talk to them because I have all these things I feel ashamed of or embarrassed about that I did in the past. And so I can't really look them in the eye. So I'd rather run away from them or not, walk on the other side of the street, or maybe they won't notice me, or maybe I can dodge out of this situation. So all of that avoidant behavior and activities allows us to be able to come in and say, wait a minute, I'm going to see this all as an opportunity to clean up the past. And I'm going to do that in different ways. but I'm going to do that because my value system that I'm becoming more aware of, maybe I've lost my moral compass. Maybe I never had a moral compass. Maybe I was never modeled a moral compass. And consequently, I'm having to come, what are the things that I believe today really I value? Do I value honesty in myself? Do I value honesty from other people? Can I trust other people if I don't think they're honest? These are things that in my value system, I may say, keep your word. I said I was going to do this, so do it. Oh, didn't say I was going to do it if I felt like it. I said I would do it. So go ahead and take the action, follow through, so that your word is something that can be trusted by you as well as other people. Because part of this is, our interactions with others, but a lot of it is about our own interpretations about what happened. And then the internalization of that, thinking that that's kind of the core of who we are. So we have the shame core potentially from numerous things that have happened to us along the way, some of which we did and some of which were done to us. And so it doesn't matter which way it comes. It just matters is it still, if I'm open to it, is it still something that troubles me that I'm carrying with me, that I've never really resolved within myself, let alone with somebody else? Making amends isn't that they're going to necessarily be able to mend the fence or mend the relationship. It just means that I'm willing to do what I can within my capabilities to mend the situation or just be accountable for the situation, take responsibility for the situation.
Thank you, Randy. So what we're going to do at the end of this video is we're going to review homework. And in the homework, we are going to review some of these bad habits. We're going to think about these moments that don't match up with our value system. We're going to go back and realize all of these things that we hold shame towards or guilt towards, and we're going to write them down. We're going to create a list. This is similar to what we did last week, but a little bit different. We're going to get to the bottom of what these functions are behind driving these habits. And I will note that attitude is super important here. And we touched on that last week, this willingness to be willing. We really have to come towards this with the right attitude because it's going to be hard. It is going to be difficult to dig through the past and it is going to bring up a whole bunch of stuff. And we're here for you. I think it's really important that you understand that you have a support system here and that you are surrounded by people who can relate and who are all in this together. So if you do have a lot of feelings coming up, if you feel depressed, or if you feel like you need some extra one-on-one support, please do know that we're here and you can reach out to us at any time. So feel free to send us an email. We are here for you. One thing I will note as well is once we start sharing in these private groups, you'll start to hear yourself in others. And that's a big part of this process too, is when we start sharing as a community, you'll start to relate to what other people are saying and you'll start to see yourself in others. And that will really help this process as we all realize that we're living similar lives and we've been through similar things and we're all in this together. And it's something we can all work through. So as we start to dig up this stuff, we need to be willing to let it out and to process it and to do the work that needs to be done, which brings us on to our third topic here, which is willingness to do the work and make amends. So Randy, can you tell us a little bit, what does it mean to do the work?
To do the work is actually making the list, making the awareness that you are looking at things from the past that you have regrets about or guilt about, shame about, and in that list, as you mentioned, Jess, there's going to be some things that come up, and you may start to find yourself feeling depressed, as you mentioned. And what I want to add to that is this idea that you may find in this looking through your history and story. I want you to be conscious of the fact you might feel some things you feel good about. You might find some strength that you go, wow, I did a bunch of things, but I also didn't do those or actually helped out over there, or I did something that I feel good about today. And I want to keep that in the mix so that not only are we cleaning up the past, usually when we're going back and dealing with uncomfortable things, it isn't things that we did well. It isn't the things that we say, oh, yeah, I did that. These are the things that, oh, my God, I hope nobody finds out. Uh, so it looks like we're only focusing on the negative. I want you to know that this is about being able to see yourself more fully in all kinds of ways. What I've noticed over my experience is that when you have an accumulation of a lot of things you don't want to feel, you don't want to deal with, you don't want to look at, that it actually robs you of an awareness of so many things that you could feel good about if there wasn't so much negativity in the way. So one of the sweetest things that I've noticed is that as people came and were able to clean out the past, when they would start out, they'd say, I can't think of one good thing about my life. My childhood was awful. It was horrible always. So we went in and started cleaning some things out, dug up some things, made some amends for some things. And they go, oh God, I forgot. I remember I used to play tennis with Joe and Larry and Bill and Marty, and I used to do that for years. We did it all the time, or we go out and shoot baskets and hang out together. And those were a blast, and they were really. But I completely had blocked all of those out because I didn't want to remember my past, and because I didn't want to remember my past, I couldn't remember a lot of the good things as well. So this is so cool that you can find this way of thinking, oh my God, only going to be dealing with trauma and misery and guilt and shame. Wait a minute. No, we're going to get a lot of stuff out of the way. So you're going to find some joy and some happiness and some laughter and some playfulness and all kinds of things are going to come in here. And so just know that that's waiting for you. But you have to be willing to do the first stages to be able to enjoy this home that we're creating, this way of life that we're creating. You may have to get a bunch of rubble out of the way first. Well, not maybe. You will have to get rubble out of the way first so that you can allow yourself to also remember some of the things you feel good about. You go, oh, yeah, I had a great time with those people. We used to do that all the time. And I completely forgot that was part of my life. And so and so in this willingness, it's the attitude I'm willing to do whatever is required. And it starts out with usually the pain, which is why people don't want to do it. To find the richness of your life, to find the fullness of your life, you have to be willing to do whatever comes to you. If everything that comes to you is an opportunity for you to enhance yourself as a human being or enhance your life today, then we can't pick and choose here. We have to be willing to clean it all up. And then we are really ready because we got a new attitude of willingness. We've com- we've been able to prove to ourselves we can address things that are very, very painful and distressing, but we do it. And when we're done, inevitably people feel lighter, we feel better, they feel refreshed, they feel clean. Something has changed inside of them that cannot be particularly explained other than getting rid of internal distresses that only drag the energy of your life down so that you're more just surviving all the time. And we know you're all survivors. We know you survived. You're still here.
Absolutely, that's super helpful. So it's like we're mending fences here, right? We have all these experiences, we've had breakdowns, we have blockages between two people, let's say, or in relationships, and now we're mending those fences so that we can come back together. We're creating harmony in our lives, and that allows us to reestablish connections. Along the way, we've lost touch with a lot of people. We've lost touch with ourselves. We've repressed a lot. We've put attached negative connotations to a lot of the things that we've been through. And now we're going to try and create some more harmony and reestablish those connections so that we can feel good about where we're at in our lives and who we're surrounded with. And so that's why it's so important at this stage to make amends. Now, I don't want you to worry too much about sending letters or making phone calls. I completely understand. I've been through this process myself. It is a little daunting to think that you're going to pick up the phone and call somebody or that you're going to write a letter. The purpose of this is to make these amends. And so don't focus too much on the letter or on the phone call. Just consider what it is that you'd like to release. Think about the shame and the guilt that you feel towards some of your memories and experiences, and consider what it would be like to mend those fences and to reestablish those connections. And so if we don't make amends, then that creates other problems. Can you talk to us about that a bit, Randy? What happens if we don't make amends?
If you don't make amends, then it does two things. Keeps you in a state of awareness, meaning that my life does not matter enough to me. I'm not willing to do whatever is required to have the quality of life that I'd like to have. So if I don't do this, then it's going to mean that I am saying to myself, well, you don't really matter that much, or this is really too hard. If you really matter, then this is where we get stuck. And so that's a part of it. Another part of it is it keeps us distant from the other people because we got a barrier between us that says, I did that awful thing to them. So I don't really deserve to have a good experience with that person or a good feeling with that person or a good memory with that person because I'm still got this thing I'm holding back. But I want to underline we are not going to make anybody do anything. We're going to suggest and you're going to get guidance about how that might be appropriate and when. The bottom line though is, are you willing to do what's needed if it's needed? Or are you at least willing to become willing, possibly, in this process once you start to gain some confidence in the process that maybe what we're offering to you is something that can dramatically change your life and help you get unstuck. So part of the reason is you don't get any relief. Part of the reason is it keeps up barriers. And the last thing is that you don't get to have the joy of what it's like to be able to be freed of these things that you've decided are bad about you. So another aspect of this is the foundation that we're building around who we think we are and how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. And it's the foundation that is going to get us in aware of the fact that there's something bigger going on here than we're conscious of. There's something about your powerlessness around being stuck for however long you were stuck that we are moving into an act of faith. Maybe the faith is that this program can be of help to you. Maybe there's a faith that starts to expand, that you start to recognize that, wait a minute, maybe there's resources available to me, whether they're in the form of other human beings or attitudes or ideas that I can draw upon to deal with my powerlessness that I come into this program with. And in most of the 12-step program, all the 12-step programs, one of the first steps is around powerlessness over whatever this particular addiction is, this habit. And the requirement is fairly quickly is to accept the fact that there's a power greater than you that could restore you back into some sort of state that's unstuck. And we are not going to initially focus on the idea of a higher power or a larger consciousness, but we're going to get into the action. And the action is let's start cleaning things up. And as that happens, what seems to come with it is some faith in a process that is guided in a way that seems to be unusual for most of us to live in, or most of the world seems to live in. And part of that is these little paradoxes that are going to come up. One of the paradoxes that comes up is I am powerless and I'm responsible. I am surrendering to be able to receive what's available to me. I'm surrendering my old ways of thinking that are keeping me stuck so that something else can come into place. It's an opening. Willingness is an opening. And if we're not open to things being different, then they can't be because we're just going to believe the truth is nothing changes and we have to be this way. And if I start to let go of some of my old ways of thinking and habits, who am I? What's left? Well, I can guarantee you the faith is, and the faith of this program is that something better than you can imagine may come out of this process. You may have come into this with one idea of what you thought you were going to get out of it, my experience is that you take these steps and life can unfold in ways that you don't imagine, but it comes from that idea that there's something better happening here than I know about.
You're absolutely right. What we're doing here is we're preparing ourselves. We're building up knowledge. We're building up strength. We have tons of support on our side and faith. We believe that it is possible to create change in our lives, and we have to just put ourselves out there and really truly believe that it is possible to create change. And so in the next module, we will talk about things that have happened to us or that have been done to us. So the actions that we're talking about in this module are things that we have done, things that we have to take responsibility for. We will, in the next modules, talk about things that have been done to us, which we may have processed differently. And there are activities that we'll work around when it comes to what's been done to us. But let's focus this week on anything that has happened in our lives that we have control over, that we are taking responsibility for those things that we were involved in and that we were responsible for. So that brings us to the end of this second module. Let's recap everything that we just went over. So we talked about cross addictions and switching, and those are the ways in which we subconsciously switch to new habits in order to correct old habits. We learned that switching habits does not solve the problem. It only leads to more avoidance. We also determined that we would get to the bottom of what is driving our habits, and that's what we'll work on during the homework today. We learned the importance of cleaning up the past, and we came to understand that we have to make amends in order to feel better and to have progress. We discussed that we have to do the work, which consists of digging through the past so that we can uncover and acknowledge all the repressed memories we hold shame or guilt towards. We have acknowledged that this is going to be a really challenging process and that it's totally normal for all sorts of feelings to come up when we start to dig through this stuff. Keep in mind that you have the support you need and that you're in the right place for taking on this task. We also learned about the importance of having the right mindset to work through these challenges. We're digging this stuff up because it's what's required. This is what we're here to do. We're here together to work through this stuff, and that's why we're doing all this really difficult stuff. We're willing to do whatever it takes to get unstuck. We're also here to mend fences and reestablish connections that will help us get unstuck. And then lastly, we talked about building a foundation and having faith in this whole healing, creating change process. So this week's homework, we're going to do two things. We are going to list behaviors. Last week, we had a list of bad habits. This week, I want you to think about behaviors you feel guilty or ashamed about. Go through your repertoire of the past. Think about all these things that you might be holding shame and guilt towards. And we're going to work through this list together. We have the group call together, and you will have time and space to really reflect on this stuff with others. And then the second part here is going to be thinking about whether you're ready, willing, and able to take ownership of what you did that caused you to feel such shame and guilt. So that's a two-part. You've got your list, and then you also have to consider whether you're ready to write that letter or to make that phone call. In your workbook, if you have a look now, we've got a worksheet there. What you're going to do is you're going to make note of the person involved in your memory or the people, and then you are going to make note of what happened. So just describe briefly what it is that you are wanting to make amends for. And then you're going to write a little bit about how you felt. So what does that feel like? What is the shame? What is the guilt? What are the feelings associated with this memory that is obviously causing you discomfort? And then we'll think about, in this fourth section, you have a little area here where you can write about how you feel about that today. So you'll be able to see how you felt before and how you feel today. All of that we're going to compile in this homework worksheet. So have a look at your workbook. You'll be able to find all that there. And then once you have your list all compiled, you'll be able to look at it and decide whether you're ready to make amends. Now, Don't worry too much again about writing these letters or making these phone calls. During the group call this week, we will have time to discuss what a letter might look like, how you might go about a phone call like this. These are stressful things, and there is a way to go about it so that it feels much more feasible and less stressful. So we'll totally help you through this process. Don't worry too much about it. We'll discuss that on the group call. And so to introduce this week's group call, this is what we're going to go through. We're going to go through the process of what it's like to make amends. If you can come to the group call prepared with some of your behaviors or some of your stories or memories, if you can come to the call willing to share at least one of those memories, and if you can come to the call willing to listen and to hear whether you can recognize yourself in others, that's going to be super important. So the group discussion this week will revolve around these memories and what we're making amends for, and then we're going to get feedback from others. So you'll need to come prepared to this meeting with at least one example to share, please. And if you're hesitant about sharing, you're going to find that there's more similarities between us than there are differences. We want to get down to the underpinnings that drive people's behaviors. So you'll start to notice that these things you keep to yourself are actually things that other people are really familiar with as well. So it's not just you, you're not just stuck alone. We're all in this together. That brings us to the end of our module 2. Thank you so much for your time and attention, for showing up. That is the hardest part. You showed up today. You're here. We're doing the work. We're willing to be willing, and you're doing a great job. So we'll see you on the group call. Thank you so much. And thank you, Randy, for all the knowledge that you're bringing forward.
Thank you.